Welcome to the Mystic Detectives podcast, where we seek to unlock the wonders of the unknown. I'm one of your hosts, Crystal Miller.
And I'm your other host, Andrea Marziano.
Good morning, Andrea. It's not morning. Why did I say that? Good afternoon, Andrea.
It's close enough. I think it depends a lot on when one wakes up.
That's true. That is true.
It can feel very morning-ish. I'm doing pretty well. As we started talking about before we turned the mics on, it is definitely allergy season. And my eyes, nose, lungs are not appreciating it right now. So that's fun.
Yeah. Odyssey had allergies and a sinus infection at the same time. So that was good times for her.
My cough is, I think, partially related to allergies and partially related to a device that I have in my heart that I believe is sitting on my vagal nerve, which causes a cough. Because when I'm super relaxed, like when I'm giving Reiki or I'm doing a massage and I'm really in the zone, I don't cough at all. When I'm asleep, I don't cough. But when I'm awake and doing things, I cough. So
interesting.
Anyway, so this is the great interesting stuff at the top of our podcast today is our health concerns. And so we've got a lot of stuff going on. And now, Crystal, you were telling me before we started what pollen is from. Go ahead and let us know what that is.
Tree sex. Pollen is tree sex, y'all. It's the male and the female trees sending their stuff out to each other. You're welcome.
That's so funny. Right. I just envision a dating app, speed dating for trees.
Yes. I think that you should invent that, actually.
I think I should. I'd get a lot of money because trees have a lot of money to offer, and they give me enough pollen. So I think I should actually boycott
them.
Tree dating. Yes, the tree sex. That's hilarious.
Yes.
Never have I heard that before.
I hadn't heard it until recently, and I thought it was very funny.
It is very funny. So, dear listeners, you think you're only going to learn about mystic stuff. I guess some people could consider tree sex mystic, but here you go. Another day, another thing learned. You're welcome.
So you remember we recently bought my kid, Torin, a car, and it was a pretty good experience. All in all, Torin had to learn to drive a stick shift, which they've done very well. They're pretty comfortable. Fun fact, they've still never been on the freeway. And when I say never been on the freeway, I mean literally never been on the freeway, as in not when they were learning to drive, not for their driver's test, and not now. So that's a little bit of a concern.
I thought part of the driver's test was going on the freeway. It's not
apparently not in Oklahoma.
Huh. Interesting.
So yeah, that was interesting. Anyway, so they were driving to school the other day, and their car just stopped in the middle of the road. Dead. And they were like, called me, and they were like, what do I do? And they're showing me their dashboard and all three, their brake light, their oil light, and their tire light. I don't remember what it was. Oh, battery light. Thanks. Odyssey's eavesdrop it, just so you guys know. So she's answering things I don't know. So
yeah, that often is an indicator of battery health.
Yeah. So I couldn't get to them because I had a doctor's appointment that I had to go to. And so I called Zach and asked Zach to go help him. Or maybe he called Zach. I don't remember, but they called Zach. Anyway, they were pushed off to the side of the road in front of a mobile glass company. And so one of the guys that worked there came out and was helping them before Zach got there. And I was still on the phone with them. And they were checking. It was so cute. Like, they didn't know how to open their hood. They didn't know how to make their hood stand up. And I'm not saying this at all to embarrass them. I'm just saying,
it's things you don't think about.
Exactly. And so they didn't know how to check their oil. And so they know all of those things now.
Yeah.
And anyway, so the guy looked at the battery and it was very corroded. And so he's like, I think your problem is that you've got to, clean this corrosion off or whatever.
Sure.
So Torin was still like really freaking out about the three lights on. And I'm like, Torin, where's the key in your ignition? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, is it on the ACC? And they were like, yeah. I'm all, your lights are on because you're in accessory mode, my dear.
Yes. Yes. Uh-huh.
They were convinced they'd blown up their engine or seized their engine because all three lights came on at once. Anyway, so
Yeah.
Zach came. They drove. They were able to get the car to start. With the guy kind of scraped some of the corrosion off. Then they went to Walmart, got some corrosion soap remover, and cleaned it up, and then brought it home. And Odyssey said, if you buy new terminals, I'll put new terminals on for you. And she goes to look at it, and she's like, what the hell is this? It was a $40 battery. It actually said on it, $40 battery. Probably not a car battery because it was too small.
Motorcycle battery.
Yeah, something like a motorcycle battery or maybe even a boat battery. So they were able to go get a new battery. Odyssey rebuilt their terminals with, replaced their terminals, and we got it all started up, and it's running well. And so it still has been a good experience, truly, but it's been an adventure, man.
It's a learning experience to be sure.
Yeah.
It really, that's awesome though, really. And to have everybody work together to get to a solution is really
that
cool.
was actually really awesome. And I was so grateful that somebody saw them and came out and helped and didn't just, watch from the windows or whatever, because Corin was very scared.
Oh, it is scary, especially if a person has no idea what to do next. Yeah, and exactly. I'm sure Torin was worried about being to school and about this is going to cost money and all of the things that are true.
Yeah. So that was really stressful. Just like, they don't have a job. They're like, how am I going to pay for this? What am I going to do? Why is life so hard?
Yeah. Well, and that is not an uncommon question for those of us to ask ourselves. It's funny, if this is any consolation for Torin, I have a new motorcycle, which is a 3-wheel, and I'm now certified to ride and everything. And I took it out and I tooled around, had a great time. I came back and I was driving home and I thought, I probably need some gas at some point. Where's the gas tank? And when we were at the dealership, I'm sure the guy showed us, but I came home and I said, Max, do you remember where I'm looking around? I see nothing. I said, do you remember where the gas tank is? We literally had to look up on YouTube to find out how to find the gas tank to my motorcycle, because I think it was fortuitous, because as I was driving, I only went a total of 36 miles round trip. And as I was about a mile from home, my gas tank said, it says you need gas. And I'm like, yeah, I do think that's probably true. I don't have any idea where to put it. And so I tool up. And so we found it. Okay, cool. So I tool up to Costco for the gas. And then I thought, I don't know how much gas it takes. I don't know if it stops when the handle's in like it does for a car. And these two guys came up when they saw me on the motorcycle and they said, hey, that's nice, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, have you ever filled one of these things before? And they said no. And but the one guy came over and he was standing there talking and watching, and how people do. And note to the wise, it does click. So that was good news. All right. Also, I know now how to put gas in my motorcycle. But I thought that's hilarious. Here I have this thing, and I'm like, I probably ought to figure that out. But so tell Torin that he wasn't the only person not to know how to deal with the situation. But between YouTube and the people around me, I figured it out too. Yeah. So, anyway,
what do you got to talk about today?
Hey, you know what? We have a podcast called Mystic Detectives. It's not Auto Maintenance 101. It's not how to put gas in your motorcycle. I know I'm as surprised as you are. However, what we're talking about today is super cool. I say that every time, though, don't I? But we're talking about sacred geometry. Have you ever heard of sacred geometry?
I have. I haven't heard a lot about it. I like the thing I've heard the most is the
Fibonacci
sequence. My mouth is not going to work. I said ab, by the way, because I know. Because I'm so sorry, listeners, but this is funny. When my sister opened a bookstore, a Mormon bookstore in Ohio, in Columbus, Ohio, it was called Abinadi Books. And Abinadi is a character in the Book of Mormon. That's all you need to know how Mormons pronounce it. But everybody that would come to her store, because it was also a homeschooling store, so she had a lot of people come. So they were Christians just doing homeschool and stuff. Every single person called it Abinadi Books. So that's where my almost Abenaki sequence came from.
That's hilarious.
Fibonacci sequence is exactly. I can't say sequence. Sequence.
Oh. Well, that's okay. We won't talk much about that anyway, but it is sort of related to what we're talking about in the repetitiveness of things in life, and that there are sequences. We've talked about frequencies. We've talked about other things in our world that are really, I guess, prescribed the way it is. It just is what it is. You think of things like the lines in the tree trunks showing their growth patterns and stuff. Now, it's not strictly speaking probably a sacred geometry because it has variance, but it tells a story. So sacred geometry is something that's a little bit different than that. It's symbols and ancient shapes and patterns that hold special significance. And they hold significance for a lot of different things, a lot of different reasons, but they're believed to represent all things in the universe. So everything in the universe has some sort of form of a sacred geometry symbol. And there are some people believe there's 8 sacred geometry items. Some believe there's 15 or 16 or 17. And it's just the patterns that have been found through all history, and also can be found in a lot of things that we see in the world. And so some of them I'll touch on just real quick, and then I'll go into more depth for some of them and some of the other things that I found. The first one that most people believe in is the flower of life. And this, I think most people have seen at some point, whether they know they've seen it or not, but it consists of 7 symmetrical circles that are overlapping, and they're arranged in the shape of a flower. Now, if you look into a flower, you can sometimes see that flower of life shape. Some flowers will have that in an obvious way, some won't. But it doesn't mean that this looks like a rose necessarily. It's just overlapping shapes. And we'll talk a little bit more about the flower of life. And then Metatron's cube is something that a lot of people have probably heard, especially if they believe in archangels. And this is the archangel Metatron that they're talking about. And then the seed of life is something a lot of people have heard about, and it's similar to the flower of life. And then a circle. Circle is considered by a lot of people sacred geometry because it's found in so many different places, and it symbolizes unity and wholeness in the universe. And then the sphere also represents inclusion, oneness, and integrity. And then the point, you talk about point crystals, and that is referencing connection to the beginning and end of all things. Those are some of the sacred things that people talk about. And that I had seen reference in my research to all of those things. But the things that came up most commonly are 16 different symbols that most groups seem to agree on. Excuse me. And they're various shapes and patterns, but they're perfect. They mirror itself or a shape consistently through the design, and it's in there and it's really obvious to see. Now, I don't know if when people first discovered these, if they actually saw the shape or they envisioned what they felt it might be. I'm not really sure, but they are said to make up the basic templates of every life form in the universe. So a template for every single life form, which I thought, gosh, that's, as I think about it and as we talk about it, you may see that too, or maybe you won't, but that's what they talk about it. And then they also talk about these being from the 5 Platonic solids. And these can be the shapes can be broken down into metaphysical language that governs the visible and the invisible world. Now that's kind of the overview of what these are, and we'll go into more depth on each of them. Do you have any questions or thoughts at this time?
No, I'm excited to learn more. And I mean, like I said, the only thing that I think of when I think of sacred geometry is the Fibonacci sequence.
Exactly. And what's funny is these shapes have various meanings, and they connect to different parts of the world, are universe, which we'll talk about it. And ancient philosophers, artists, and musicians all over the world have been known to bring some of these aspects into what they do. And it includes the golden ratio in Mozart's music, the Fibonacci sequence in, yeah, you are there, and Egyptian pyramids, which I thought was fascinating because I've always just thought it as the numbers and the frequencies, but they talk about it related to Egyptian pyramids. I didn't see a lot about that. I'm sure it's out there, but I didn't see a lot. And also the Plato solids. So Plato talks about the different solids in the universe. Mm-hmm. So with these things, the hexadron is connected to Earth, and it is considered one of the 5 platonic solids. Or shapes, I'm sorry. And
hexadron?
Hexadron. Mm-hmm.
Okay, just want to make sure I heard it.
No, I'm sorry, I mispronounced it. Thank you for noticing it. Hexahedron.
Hexahedron, okay.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. And sure, I've actually put on my glasses now, so I can see the notes I made. And it's one of the 5 platonic shapes. And it's one of probably the best known that we have. And the shapes have similar size faces, similar length, edges, and similar interior angles. And if it's put into a sphere, each of its points will touch a part of the sphere. It looks a lot like a cube, and it's a little, when it's given in all of its areas of depth, it's not strictly a cube, but it looks like a cube. It's also known and associated with giving light to the body. And it's believed to set the standard in which the body and the spirit relate. And the way I look at that is because it's equal in all of its parts. And so I feel like it will assist us to show that if we have all of these areas in balance, then we're probably in our best form situation, mental, physical, spiritual sort of thing. Sure. And each platonic shape of the hexahedron represents one of the 5 elements. And it represents Earth because of its stability, and it's got a solid foundation. And for people who are looking for consistency and that sort of thing in their lives, this is a sacred geometry shape that they might want to implement. Now, ways to implement that are strictly just, looking at it, building the shape. I have a set of crystals that has each one of the element shapes on them. So people can do that, think about it, however they like to bring these things into their lives. But it's one of the shapes and one of the sacred geometry pieces that are advised to just bring balance into lives. Now, the next one is the flower of life. We talked about it just briefly at the beginning here, but it's one of my favorite to visually look at because it draws me in for some reason. Mm-hmm. But it's said to be the physical representation of the connection that a human feels with all living things in the universe. And it can be found in different religions and cultures all over the world. And that's what I find fascinating, is when these symbols, these ideas go over into every aspect of life, where it's spiritual and physical, and people see it and connect with it. And maybe that's one of the reasons I feel drawn to it. But the shape is said to represent a tree cycle of growth. And as we talked about, the tree's trunk has the circles, but the flower of life is more intricate. And this represents coming from the seed to bearing fruit. So from the very beginning till through its life cycle. And it's considered one of the mystical geometric shapes in the world. And so that just is pretty awesome to me. And in order to create the shape, 7 circles are overlapped to form a flower pattern that builds outwards. So it goes bigger and bigger and bigger. What?
It's like the world's largest Venn diagram.
There you go. And actually, what's funny is one of the other shapes is considered a Venn diagram. But yeah,
that's funny.
It kind of looks like that. And so it's it's often regarded as a template for everything that exists in the universe,
Mhm.
and represents unity of all things and serves as a reminder that we all come from a single blueprint. That's how people look at it.
Mhm.
And then the next thing is the seed of life. So you've got the flower of life and the seed of life. And it also comes in a variety of cultures and symbolizes the 7 days of creation. So many religions are based on the 7 days of creation. And these symbols can be found in places like churches, synagogues, and temples. It also, the seed of life appears in the Egyptian Osirian temple, which many people believe is the beginning of several major religions. And I won't go into a lot of the religious aspect of that, but people can look these up and see how it fits in maybe what they believe. And this is represented by 6, it's made up of 6 circles surrounding one in the middle. So it's a little different because it doesn't overlap as much, but it makes rings. And it represents the cycles and then different points in the creation of the universe is what people believe about it. And everything is connected to the other part. So they all are connected. And this is one I know that you've seen before, the Hamsa. Hamsa? Do you know how to say that correctly? Hamsa hand? Yeah. And I know
Hamsa?
you used to sell stickers
Hamsa.
of it in your store. That was the first time I had actually ever seen it.
I
But
did.
that's one of the most common sacred geometric shape. And I bet a lot of people who look at it don't consider it as a geometric shape. And the hand is said to bring its owner good fortune, health, luck, and happiness. And it's spelled in different ways in different communities, but it's also known as the hand of Fatima or the hand of Miriam in some cultures. And some of the images have 2 thumbs, one on each end, and some of them have only one. And do you know any more about that since you used to carry a sticker, or did you just think it was cool?
Oh man, I'd have to dig deep into the archives of my brain. But I'm looking up an image right now just to see if I can refresh.
As soon as you see it, I know you'll
my-
remember it. But one of the things that in the Jewish culture, apparently, it represents the 5 books of the Torah, and in the Hebrew culture, and in Judaism, the hand symbolizes the effort to praise God, and so I've always been fascinated by this symbol, but I've never actually looked it up. So that was fun for me to learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah, it mostly just protection is its big, like if you had an overarching umbrella, it's about protection.
Yeah.
And safety.
That's how I've looked at it too. And then when I was looking at it, this is what was kind of funny when I was looking at that. Have you ever seen the evil eye image?
Sure.
Well,
I think it's so weird.
Yeah. Well,
I'm just kidding.
It's this hand in some of the renditions have what looks like an eye in it to me. And the first time I saw it, I thought that was part of it, was the evil eye. And I thought, oh, that's a scary one. Although when I looked into the evil eye, it actually isn't necessarily meant to be evil.
Well, not only that, the Hamsa hand is actually a protectant against the evil eye. So let's say the evil eye were evil, air quotes. If you had the Hamsa hand and the evil eye looking at each other, it'd be a face-off.
Rock, paper, scissors. Right. And listeners, you understand our personalities a little bit, I think, by now. And we do go on tangents sometimes. And it's, to me, when people see symbols of any kind, I know that they carry meaning with them, whether it's a meaning that that symbol is traditionally known for, or if it's something that has come into their life one way or another. Because I know there's some symbols that I've heard other people talking about, and they either have a really strong visceral reaction of the positive or negative, which may or may not have anything to do with what that symbol means to most people. And that's one thing that I think is important to remember when we talk about these things with others. What I might be saying here may be totally different from what other people believe or have experienced with these symbols. And I think one of the most important things is for us to be open-minded to others and how they feel about them and what they mean to them, because these things can be so important to people. And also some people just think they're pretty, and that's okay too. And our we've had a lot of podcasts where some things mean something really huge to some people, and other things they just think, oh, that's fascinating. It doesn't resonate with me, but I hear you. And to me, that's one of the goals that we have in this podcast. And our tagline leading out is stay curious and keep exploring. Well, yeah. And that's all we're doing here. So if you listeners have other ideas of what these symbols might mean to you, please let us know, because I know they mean different things to different people. These are just some of the things that I brought out in my research, because we can't cover everything.
Sure.
But I love learning about these different things. Now the next one, which in this list is considered number 5, and this order is random because I've seen them in different ways on different lists, but this is sort of a random list saying these things. Yeah. So the tree of life. I don't think there's very many people that probably haven't seen some representation of the tree of life.
Sure.
And it's very common to make in jewelry. I do wire wrapping jewelry, and every site I'm on has something about a tree of life.
Yeah.
And they're beautiful.
I've often seen it used as the handle for a drum.
Yes. Yeah. And that actually is one that I'm challenging myself to build this summer, a tree of life handle. Cool. So I'm looking forward to it. I like to do it outside by the creek, so I get to wait until it's not raining on me all day.
Sure.
Although it keeps the hide nice and moist. But this tree, this symbol, the tree of life, is an element of sacred geometry that takes the form of 10 numerical entities. And some tree of life, when people are building it, don't have 10 branches. They just have what looks artistic, and that's fine. But the original tree of life, these entities are living beings that embody all numbers from 1 to 10. And from metaphysical potencies and ciphers. And the resource that I found said that the 10 numerical entities are collectively known as Sephirah in Jewish culture. And pardon me if I'm mispronouncing that. The term loosely translates to endless. And it represents the unspeakable infinite God. And what I find fascinating about these is, like I say, it's got cultural meanings for different types of cultures, as well as meanings in nature. And when we talk about things that divide people, when they talk about how these things can't dwell together, that's not what I find when I look through what the original meanings of things are. Sure. So it's that is part of my wonder about people, is how we separate ourselves so much over things that really probably started out being a similar thing. Yeah. But that's me on my soapbox for just a moment. But it's often depicted, the tree of life, as downward growing tree with its roots at the top and the branches at the bottom. And in this sort of sacred geometry representation. And this shows the transition of created beings from the bottom to the top. And so one of the tree of life that I saw that is different from what we see in jewelry, to me actually kind of looks like an upside down candle. And
interesting.
And it's not, I get that, but that's what it kind of looked like to me. And it's a different representation than what I've seen. But the idea about the balance between the ascending and descending forces are, like many of the other sacred shapes, is they're balanced, they are continuous, they're uninterrupted. And this is traditionally considered where this shape that is known as the Star of David comes from. And it shows harmonizing these polarizing forces in the universe. And so also in philosophical terms, the balance is considered with the words as below, above, so below. And I think most of us have heard that in some way or another. Sure. And so to me, again, another sacred geometry shape that just represents balance and evenness and consistency and all of those sorts of things. So,
by the way, if you like scary things, As Above, So Below is a great horror movie. It's fun, scary as hell, and I recommend it. There you go.
Awesome. There we go. Another way to look at as above, so below. Awesome. And
I'm going to have people be like, scary as hell. You're a dork. And I'll be like, correct.
Yeah, correct. You nailed it.
Nailed it. But even my horror loving children love it. So
That's
I'm just
awesome.
saying.
But again, it's funny because that's just another way we look at things. Each one of us will hear these things and we'll have a different idea of what it might mean. And some of them are complementary and some of them are completely diverse, which is fine too. And so awesome. The next thing on this random list is the egg of life. And I had never heard of the egg of life. Had you?
No, I've never heard of that.
Yeah. And I think I've seen something like it, but I've never heard of it. So anyway, the egg of life is comprised of 7 circles that cut into each other. So some of them have been next to each other, some have been overlapped, like sitting on top. These actually cut in. So it shows up as part of a circle with part of a circle. And so
I'm just looking up the pictures. I'm not Facebooking or anything.
Well, since our podcasters can't see you.
And I apologize. I know I was going to say, I apologize. I keep yawning. It's not, I know our listeners can't see that either, but it's because I'm hot, not because I'm bored or tired.
That's good news. Good news. But for the egg of life, it's widely regarded as the framework for all creation. And so when I see the shape I saw, I don't know what you're seeing there, Crystal, but I saw one that actually seemed like it had sort of a human figure behind it. And I don't know where these artistic creations come from, which is something I was thinking about too, is so these are thought to have certain shapes and sizes and stuff. And then they come into an artistic creation where I see them and they're a little different with different artists. So I wonder what is most accurate.
I know you guys can't. I don't even know if that's going to work.
Yeah. No.
They're quite different. So
they are quite different. So,
but they're all saying they're the egg of life. So who knows?
Yeah, I feel like it's like when we've talked about things like crystals and other things, it's what draws us. So if it's something that connects for us, then that's the one we can look at, or we can just disregard all of it altogether. Sure. But this is also known as the seed of life by some people. And all living things adjust their spirit to balance through the egg of life is what is said. And it is also said that this shape contains the entire realm of music within its cells and is responsible for the whole musical scale of tones and semitones. Now, I'm not a musician, although I play one on TV. When I do my sound baths and things like that, I do play musical instruments, and I do it more by feeling and intuition than any actual knowledge, which it makes some people laugh, saying, well, you haven't taken formal classes, but you do these things. And I said, I do, because I listen to my heart. And so maybe these tones show up for people somehow in this shape. I'm not sure what that looks like, but
yeah, there are people who see music. So
yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. What was that movie with that little boy who August Rush? Is that what it's called?
Close.
Yeah. Anyway, it was where the boy did see music in his head, and he could play anything. Yeah. And I know that's a real thing. And it's fascinating to me because that's not something I've ever been able to do. But it's amazing when I've seen people that are basically music savants where they just see that. So maybe they see notes in this shape. I don't, but I don't see notes either. So but it also represents oneness, and also that it represents somehow to some cultures that there are 3 necessary things in a person's life. And I don't know, I don't see it that way, like I said, because I don't see that in it, but it represents fertility, stability, and health in many cultures. And I get that when you're talking about the egg of life, the beginning of things, that those are some things that are vital to carrying on. And
Sure.
so I get how that can relate. And the next thing is one I really like a lot too, although I may have said that about most of them so far, but it's Metatron's cube. And that's related to the study of angels in Christianity. Because Metatron, as we said before, is considered one of the archangels.
Mm-hmm.
And Metatron is considered to be in charge of supervising the flow of energy. And he uses his Metatron cube to facilitate that flow. Now,
if I recall correctly, he's also a pain in the ass in Supernatural.
Well, there you go. See? And so it's another perspective. That's funny. And the cube contains every perfect geometric shape used in this case, the version is God's creation. And since it is considered a Christian thing, they talk about God's creation in that relationship. And Archangel Metatron is also considered to oversee the tree of life by sending the creative energy from the crown of the tree to every other part of creation. And whether a person believes in God or something like that, it can be considered just the source of things, the source of energy. And I like the imagery of that energy coming through the crown of the tree or the source and then going everywhere, because that just looks beautiful to me.
Okay.
And so that I like that idea a lot, that it just comes, it's part of the connectiveness of our universe to me. Now, whether it comes from Metatron's cube or not, can't say, but I liked that imagery. And it also is considered to have all of the Platonic solids in it. And so it makes the building blocks of every type of physical matter. So
interesting.
Yeah. And so again, don't know where to take that exactly, but the fact that it's considered to have all of the building blocks of the physical matter makes it kind of amazing.
Yeah.
And
I don't know. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but it kind of makes me think of, it makes me wonder. And I, if I sound like an idiot saying that, it's okay. I really don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm just sharing my thoughts with you. It makes me wonder if it's like a subatomic thing or if it's like a quantum physics thing. You know what I mean? Or if it's both. I mean, I don't know much about either of those. So, but that is what kind of I think of when you say the building blocks of all matter, because we know that all matter is also an atom. And then you get into molecules and neutrons and protons and electrons and blah, 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 blah. But, is it that literal? Or is it more of a quantum theoretical sort of thing? Or is it neither? Is it just like, because,
That's the one.
Shut up and stop thinking about it, Crystal. Just kidding.
We would never say that on this podcast. At least I wouldn't. Well, and good questions. I don't know enough about those topics either. So our quantum physicists that are listening to this podcast, please weigh in.
Yes,
and let us know what you think, because this is just science by Crystal and Andrea. So we do apologize to the actual scientists in the world for our take on this. But the contents of Metatron's cube are also considered to be seen in all living things, from human DNA to ice crystals. If you look at the Metatron cube, you can see some of the things that we have created to image every aspect of life, is what they say. So I remember when I was in school in probably one of my first science classes, and I saw DNA. One of my first questions to myself, because I probably didn't ask this, but when they showed the DNA and the chain, I thought, does it really look like that?
Right.
Or did somebody make it up? It took me a long time to find out the answer to that. But this Metatron cube is like I said, having all these things appear in it. And so I just think that's really kind of a unique way to look at things. All right. And so the next one is called the Vesica Pisces. And it's a shape that's probably familiar from high school studies involving the renowned Venn diagram that you referenced earlier, Crystal. And the shape is made up of two overlapping circles, and then they form an almond shape mandalora in the middle. And it's one of the symbols that has various sacred geometry meanings in different cultures. And so it in Christianity is closely associated with the fish, the Jesus fish that people write on their cars and things. And in other religions, the symbol represents femininity and birth due to the close resemblance to the female birth organ. And so those are quite diverse, in my opinion, of what they could mean. And so, again, it comes down to a person's perspective and maybe the stories that they've heard. And other spiritual viewpoints associate the circles as a source of energy, God, and as creation. So by thinking one circle is the energy source, the second circle would then depict the creation of something new. And it's widely regarded as the joining of the physical and the spiritual realm. It looks like that's something that everybody agrees on, is joining the spiritual and physical realms. Now, with spiritual, people will sometimes consider spirituality and religion the same thing.
Right.
But I think many people also consider them as different things. So spirituality and religion aren't necessarily the same thing. Right. Many people think that without this shape, there's no other sacred geometry shape that would exist. No other part in nature that would exist. Okay, so the next one is called the eternal knot. And this is one that I think most people have seen. A lot of people consider it the Celtic knot. And people, I think most people are probably familiar with that. And it's known as the endless knot. And it's also called the Tibetan knot, which I had not heard about before. And in Buddhism, it's called the 8 auspicious symbols. And the symbols can be considered the treasure in Buddhism, I believe, is vase, victory banner, golden fish, parasol, lotus, and the conch shell. Now, I'm not familiar with any of those things, and so I was kind of looking at the knot to see if I could see that sort of thing. And since I'm not familiar with them, I can't, but that's what it represents in the Buddhist culture. And it's also found a lot in Chinese culture and art. And I have seen this Celtic knot. And I've seen when it's a Celtic knot that I'm associated with, it's usually in a ring, and it's a very tight symbol, a very tight knot. But in its original sacred geometry form, it's a wider knot. There are bigger spaces in between it. And it involves a really elaborate design of intertwined and looped lines, and they cross in and out of each other at 90 degrees. And so with that, when a person looks at it, especially as I look at it where I've seen it the most, and like I say, it's in a ring, there's no beginning and there's no end. Right. It's one of those things that when I was looking at it, it reminded me of the thing where you try and put a pencil on the paper and make the line without crossing over or something or stopping. And that just showed it. I was just thinking of that when I saw it. However, that would be impossible with a two-dimensional process because they overlap and things like that. Right. And I think that's a fun diagram. And there's no math involved. At least there probably is, but not in my perspective. I like things without math involved. But the sacred significance of it is being an eternal knot. And it represents time, a spiritual path, divine consciousness. And I really like that imagery of it just being an eternal knot. It is forever. Whatever a person wants to look at it. Often it's looked at with a relationship. But I look at it as the beginning, the end, it's all entwined, and it just keeps going. And that seems really beautiful to me. And when I think about it as being on a spiritual path or some sort of a growth, I like that because it just keeps going. Now, sometimes my knot might feel a little bit funny or might not be at a perfect 90-degree angle, but I guess I like the idea of the fact that it could look like that. It could
Sure.
be the perfect knot for me.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
and somehow that's where I went with that.
Cool.
And when the Tibetan knot is considered to be the union of compassion, wisdom, and practice. And so when I put that into what I was thinking about with the eternal knot, like, see, that's maybe why it feels so good to me, because it's the balance of those things, compassion, wisdom, and practice.
Right.
So the next sacred geometry is the Star of David, like we talked about. And it's often referred to as a sacred triangle. And it's 6-pointed star made of 2 interlocking equilateral triangles. And that's something I didn't know.
Interesting.
When I've seen it, because mostly I contribute it to the Jewish religion. And when I've seen it, it's been worn by a person who is Jewish. And the triangles represent the connection between the Creator, humans, and the Torah to a Jewish person. And I had never really looked into why that Star of David was important to people. And when I look at it from that perspective, that connection between Creator, humans, and Torah, the most important things to the religion and culture, I realize how that could feel very sacred to someone. And a person's soul is said to connect to the Creator through the strict study and observance of the Torah in this belief. And the entities represented are said to comprise eternal and external and internal dimensions, which makes sense. And I haven't seen the reference of the Star of David outside of the Jewish tradition. And have you ever seen it in any other way?
I feel like I have, but I can't pinpoint what it was. I know that it was used in my childhood by Mormon kids as a rebellion against Mormonism.
Really?
But yeah, but I can't think of anything more significant than that. I mean, that's insignificant, but
right. I get that. And so, yeah, I just think I think it's really fun to look at a thing like that in a different perspective, which again, to me, brings my understanding, compassion for people who believe this to a different level. So I appreciate that. And the torus is another sacred geometry symbol. And some people say it's the sacred is the core. But what I think is interesting is almost all of these have been considered the core of something. So it just depends on where you come and what your perspective is. This is a graphical representation of the balance between spirit and matter. And it only happens when energy is aligned. And that's true. I mean, energy can only, these things can be balanced when energy is aligned. I think every aspect of anything we've ever talked about talks about being in alignment and energy and things like that. And so according to people who have studied sacred geometry, it explains the ascent from matter to the spirit, or descent from spirit to matter. And it's considered a tube of consciousness. And this image is one that just, I feel like I've seen it have you ever seen those things where you're supposed to look at the shape and you can start seeing it move? And that's what it looks like to me, is that shape. When I stare at it, especially in the center, it feels like it starts to move.
Right.
And so it's really intense looking at it. It's, for listeners, since you can't see the picture I'm looking at, it looks like a whole bunch of circles just moving in tandem to me. And so I invite you to look it up and see what you see in it. But when the idea behind it is that when a person's existence is in perfect balance, they cycle energy in a very perfect way. And it goes very smoothly and things like that. And when they're not in harmony with universal energy and it's disrupted, their situation can be unhealthy and stuck. And when I think about that, I wonder if people would consider Reiki working in the Taurus energy, the Taurus geometric shape, because we're talking about how we move energy and assist
Right.
it to move along.
Right. Or move over.
Yeah, exactly. And there's another one. It's called the icosahedron. I am very likely saying that incorrectly. That's how it's spelled. But it's one of the 5 platonic solids. And it's a 3-dimensional figure made of 20 triangle faces, 30 equal edges, and 12 vertices. So that's a lot. And when I look at it, it reminds me of the facet of a stone where it's got the multi-levels. That's what it looks like to me. And people consider it associated with the element of water, and it represents movement, which I do get, because, when you look at a stone and you see the movement of light on it, and our podcast that just came out was talking about gemologists, and Wes was talking about the movement of light and how things can look different in different lightings. And that reminds me of this shape. Right. And the shape is common in a lot of cultures and religions all over the world, but most closely associated with water. And it's connected to the sacral chakra. And it's connected with healing and regeneration. And to me, water is one of the most healing things. So I get that, and the flow and the balance and things that it brings. And the next thing is the tetrahedron. And it loosely is translated to 4-sided. And it resembles a triangle that's a triangular 4-sided pyramid. And something that's really fascinating to me is that it has 6 equal edges, 4 vertices, and 4 equal faces. And each face can be considered as a base. So when someone builds this, like makes an actual representation of it, it cannot fall over because every piece of it is a base. Well, I mean, if you put it on the tip, it would fall over, but any of the flat surfaces is considered a base. So it's not something that will fall. And so the shape is associated with the element of fire, which I am not sure why exactly fire, because when I look at it, it looks more like ice to me. But maybe it's just the color of the shape that I'm looking at. But it represents physical concerns, drives, passion, and it's considered to be connected to the sun, and it is considered to have unlimited healing power.
Wow.
And it's used in a lot of cultures to invoke the balance in a person's aura. And again, it's because it can remain stable on any of its sides. And so if you see a 4-sided dice, it stops easily and rolled. And I think you've used the 4-sided dice or different dice in Dungeons and Dragons in real life, right?
Of course, yes.
Yeah. And so
dice.
when it rolls, it stops on one edge. And that was just the stability that it talks about is part of what it's looked at in the metaphysical realm. And so I like that one too. And then octahedron, and guess how many sides it has?
13. Just kidding. I know it's 8.
Yay. Right. And it also is a faceted die. It can be used in a die, and like I think in Dungeons and Dragons it's also one that's used, but I've never played.
There's 1 through 12, just so you know.
Oh, okay. I got
20. I guess there's 1 through 12, and then the 20-sided dice. So.
And they all have different meanings, I'm sure. This one is considered to connected to the element of air and the heart chakra. And it's associated with unveiling a person's healing energy or compassion and spiritual nature. And so I look at it and wonder if when people are calling on their spiritual gifts, if you will, and they're wanting to have an effect with healing energy for themselves or other, if this is the sacred geometry shape that it works on.
It would work, right.
Yeah. And it's said to give people the ability to move to higher vibrational frequencies. So that sort of tracks to me that those things would be connected. And again, it's related to air. And one of the things about it that it's related to air that is to consider perhaps is that air is everywhere. It's everything in everything we do and in all the ways we affect things. So the stone that people consider related to it, and this is the first one that mentioned a stone, is fluorite. And it's, and fluorite is said to bring order amidst chaos and also can provide protection and a shield to its wearer. So, anyway, just another little tidbit. And the final one of the things I was looking at is I really probably should have looked how to pronounce these. I just read it and I thought it'd be really easy to say. This, I believe, is pronounced dodecahedron.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, Crystal does a thumbs up for me going, so dodecahedron. And it's the last of the 5 platonic solids. It has 12 equally sized faces and 30 or equal edges. So that's a lot. And the image that it is of is like a not quite rounded soccer ball. That's what it looks like to me. And other people will look at this going, Andrea is just wackadoodle, and I'm okay with that. But that's what it reminds me of. I think when I look at stuff like this, I have to associate it with something I've seen, and that's what it reminds me of. But to have 12 equally sized faces and 30 equal edges is just, if a person were to actually build one of these, can you imagine how giant that would have to be to make all that happen? It just, I mean, it'd be huge. But the shapes associated with mysteries and ascension. And Plato once said that the universe takes the shape of this item, and it's one of the most versatile and powerful platonic solids on which cellular, molecular, and atomic life is based.
Wow.
And the corresponding color is green, and it's associated with the element of ether. And I haven't looked at ether as an element, but I guess it would be because it's on the chart of elements. And
the periodic table.
Yeah. And so it cleans the energy in a particular place, facilitates communication, and amplifies humans' intentions to enhance the chakras. And as we talked about in another podcast, was our energy, the chakras are the energy centers of the body. And the shapes and symbols in these various sacred geometry pieces are just fascinating to me. And I would invite people to study these different objects and see what they're called to, because I feel like they can have a place in people's lives, or even if they just know them, to maybe connect better with the people who have used these in their religions, their histories, and their beliefs, because they show up all over the world and in so many different ways. So now you, Crystal, and these fine listeners we have might be going, okay, and so? Well, again, because I feel like this is something that can connect us to others, which is a huge thing for me. That's one way to look at these. Also, one of the things that as I mentioned before, I have small crystals that are shaped in 5 of them that are shaped in some of these different sacred geometry shapes. And I know people that use them with meditation. They some people will associate them with like the one that was colored green and fluorite and things like that. Maybe they can assist people to connect to themselves, to others, to a higher vibrational frequency. Maybe a person would want to meditate with them, maybe just consider it, maybe looking at them and seeing what draws things to them. Because with these different symbols, people who use them and believe in them feel like they can assist with the manifestation of whatever it is a person is looking for, and balancing chakras and improving life and things like that. And with these various geometric symbols, if people feel like they want to delve into it, there's a lot that can be looked at and a lot that can be investigated. And as I was looking at them, I realized that I have used some of these symbols and some of these shapes in different ways. And I just feel like it's another tool that I can put in my tool belt for the various things that I do.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. Totally.
And yeah, and so as we use these tools and tap into the various energies that are sacred to us and others, I feel like that we just have a lot of things that we can learn and investigate in. So that's what I had on the sacred geometry.
Awesome. That was very good. Thank you. It's very, I mean, that's, like I said, when you say sacred geometry, I think Fibonacci sequence and nothing else. So thank you.
You're welcome. Well, it's been fun to cover this, and we'll address more in our next podcast.
Sounds good. Talk to you later.
We'd love to hear from our listeners. To leave a comment, share a story, or ask a question, email us at listeners@mysticdetectives.com. You can also find out about our Patreon and other interesting things going on at our website, mysticdetectives.com. As always, we invite you to subscribe, share, and leave reviews to support the podcast. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week. Stay curious
and keep exploring.